Today's video, we're going to talk about some legality, some legal concepts and doctrines that were passed down from the United States Supreme Court and from the state of Florida, which most of the laws that I see Florida put out are kind of sketch, but we're going to talk about one. Is it good or is it bad? As always, I'm Marcus. You're the channel, The Debt Free Dad, where we're talking finances, financial takes, attorney reactions, current events, and all of that good stuff. Hey, full disclaimer, licensed attorney, but not your attorney. So this isn't legal or financial advice. Just letting y'all know what's going on in the household of the Debt Free Dad. Now, hey, we're going to jump right into it. The United States Supreme Court on Thursday, they dropped 2 or 3 opinions out related to issues that were kind of prevalent. One I thought was interesting because it had an impact on a sweet old grandmother who I put in the thumbnail. Shout out to Mrs. Tyler. Congrats on your win. But it has to deal with taxes owed, equity, and who has the right to get it. Now, most times, it's very rare that the Supreme Court unanimously agrees on anything. So I thought that this was extremely interesting because everybody agreed in favor of this sweet old grandmother. I thought it was an easy call. It was the right call to make. It just didn't make any damn sense. So I'm gonna pull up the letter. I'm gonna pull up the article so we can dive in, see a little bit of what's going on. I'm not gonna read it verbatim. I'm gonna jump around so you all can get the gist of what happened, what was the issue, why did Miss Tyler bring this lawsuit, why did she lose at the lower level? But hey, shout out to her, she was able to get a W. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up the article. Supreme Court sides with grandmother who lost home equity because of back taxes. Okay, now Mrs. Tyler was in Minnesota. The Supreme Court on Thursday unanimously sided with a 94-year-old grandmother who lost her home to foreclosure and then lost the equity she had in the property when the county sold the property and kept the profits. Now, I think we can already see where this is going. These blinking ads are so annoying. You close one out. Oh God, I shouldn't have did that. I clicked on it, then it took me somewhere else. All right, we just gonna have to. Oh, look at her. I'm looking at her picture right there. All right, so a Minnesota county sold Geraldine Tyler's condo for $40,000 instead of returning the $25,000 difference between the sale price and what she owed in back taxes. The county pocketed the balance and used the extra money for forest development, county parks, and recreation programs. In a unanimous opinion handed down less than a month after the justices heard the argument, Chief Justice John Roberts held that Tyler had a plausible case that the county violated the Constitution's taking clause. Taking clause is essentially a taxpayer. The taxpayer must render unto Caesar what Caesar's owed, but not more. Roberts wrote. What's at stake in the Supreme Court's foreclosure decision? Tyler's attorney said a dozen states have laws similar to Minnesota's, including New York, Arizona, Illinois, of course, District of Columbia, because they sus. And those laws can have a big impact on seniors struggling to pay property taxes after retirement. Tyler argued the county handling of the property represented a government taking that she says violated the Fifth Amendment, the taking clause, which says that private property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation. All right. Hennepin County told the Supreme Court that Tyler had 5 years to pay the taxes or sell the property, and it argued Tyler could have recaptured the surplus money and there couldn't have recaptured the surplus money and therefore doesn't have standing to sue because she owed a mortgage and back homeowners association fees. So essentially what they were saying there, this is really the breakdown. A lady purchased the house for 40 racks, paid $40,000 for the home. Somehow she got $2,300 behind in back taxes. Well, in Minnesota, the county tacked on an extra $15,000 of penalties, and fees. They foreclosed on the property. Well, not foreclosed, but they sold it at a tax lien auction because they had a tax lien. They were able to get the $40,000 that the house was worth. They took their $2,300 in back taxes. They took the $15,000 in fees and penalties, and they kept the remainder for themselves to put it into other government programs for parks and stuff. So what they argue was that she didn't have standing. What is standing? Standing means a person's ability to bring a lawsuit. In order to bring a lawsuit, you have to be the person who suffered a harm. You have to have some type of harm that's measurable that you actually suffered. Well, their argument was she doesn't have standing to bring this lawsuit. And the reason they said that she doesn't have standing was an asinine reason. But they said, okay, we sold this house for $40,000. We took our $2,300 in back taxes. We took the $15,000 in fees and penalties. The remainder of the money that we took, she didn't have the right to because she owed back homeowners association fees and she owed the bank some fees. So they were saying she didn't have the right to those proceeds, that excess money. Therefore, because she didn't have rights to that money, she had no actual harm. So she couldn't bring the lawsuit, which was a dumbass argument because if that was the argument that she owed the homeowners association fees, the county wouldn't have pocketed the rest of the money. They would have distributed the remainder of those proceeds to the bank and the homeowner association. But they didn't do that. They kept it and made some extra parks and some forest stuff or whatever the hell that they did with it. But that was essentially their argument. They said she didn't have standing to sue because she owed a mortgage and back homeowner association fee. Tyler moved out of the condo and into an apartment building for seniors in 2010, but the court rejected the idea that Tyler had abandoned the property. While the government may collect taxes and impose interest and late fees when those taxes are not paid, Robert wrote for the principle that the government can take no more than it's owed date back centuries. A federal district court sided with the county. So when she first went to court, they all said, no, you aren't entitled to anything, old ass lady. No regard to anything. A federal district court sided with the county in the dispute, and the St. Louis-based U.S. Court of Appeal for the Eighth Circuit upheld their decision. Now, the court did have a question that they elected not to address, but that's the quick summary of what happened. This lady only owed $2,300 in taxes. They tacked on $15,000 in fees. They sold her house for $40,000, and they kept what they were owed plus everything else. The court said that, y'all can't do that. So good news for her. Mrs. Tyler was able to get back $25,000 of the equity that she had in her home. Now, the other point that the court didn't make a decision on, a couple of justices commented on it, is she also put up an argument that the fines and fees were excessive. She owed $2,300 over however many years. The fine and fees came up to $15,000. That's crazy as hell, but the court left that alone. But a couple of justices chimed in, and they essentially made comments where you can tell that they had some cause to pause with how did the fees and fines add up to be that much more than what was owed. Most times when you have fines and fees, if you don't have express language how those fines and fees are calculated, most courts are probably going to find that, hey, y'all just arbitrarily throwing out numbers without giving some deference. So normally with fines and fees, you'll see something that says the fine will accrue every 30th day at 2%, or it'll say the fine can be no more than X amount of dollars, but no less than the amount of taxes owed plus 25% of whatever. So that's how some states circumvent that problem by looking like they're just making up arbitrary numbers because they have language that expressly lay out how they calculate those fees. But that brings up a crazy thing. Like, it just doesn't even make sense. Even if I don't pay my taxes, if I owe fines, you shouldn't take the equity that I have remaining after you take out what is owed to you. So I'm glad that the court agreed with that. And I actually looked around to see how some states handle this, right? And amazingly, what I found, most of the states down south handle this situation correctly, so that this poor grandmother wouldn't have got screwed over out of $25,000. Glad she was able to get it back. But I think South Carolina has probably the best statute that's favorable to homeowners who, for whatever reason, can't pay the back taxes. And I was like, that's a good rule, I think, to adopt. So I was looking in the landscape, and how it works in South Carolina is if you have land and you owe back taxes, after a certain amount of time, they're going to send you notices. You're going to get fines and additional penalties added on. After a certain amount of time, I think it was 12 months, they can sell your property at a tax lien sale. Once they sell your property at a tax lien sale, the original homeowner still has, I think it's 8 months or 10 months. No, they still have a year. That's what it is. So in South Carolina, if you owe back taxes, so let's say your back taxes was $3,000, they gave you $7,000 worth of fine. They snatch your house from you. So you owe $10,000 total. They sell your house for $100,000. Well, in South Carolina, and I thought this was a good rule, you can actually still get back your property 12 months after it was sold if, one, you pay the back taxes and the fine, plus the new person who purchased the property, you have to pay them 8% of what the sale price was. So that person who bought the property can't even really title it or take control for up to another 12 months potentially, because they give the original homeowner that time to rectify it. So in that situation I gave where you owe 10,000, they sold your house for 100,000, they took their 10,000 back, is $90,000 is what they no, they sold the house for 100,000, they took their 10,000 back. Well, if the original owner can pay back those back taxes and fines and pay the person who just purchased the property 8% of what the sale price was, which would be $100,000, they pay them 8% of that, then that person can reassume their property. So they got 12 months from the time that it was actually sold. So I thought that was a dope way to look at it. But yeah, it just didn't make any sense to take this grandmother's equity, because that equity is something that she earned. So shout out. I'm gonna give the Supreme Court a round of applause. Very rarely do they get things right. Very rarely do they get things right unanimously, but this was an easy decision. I didn't think it took, it didn't take a bunch of geniuses to figure out that that was the right move and that it does violate the Constitution. Now, the next article I want to talk about is interesting because it's about the good old state of Florida. Okay. Now, I'm not really most times when something crazy happens, I think it's either in Florida, Texas, and then a distant third is probably New York. But Florida and Texas are the first two places. Now, when Florida passes laws, there's a strong probability that DFD is going to have a problem with the law that's passed in Florida. One of the laws I saw, and I think I did a short video on it, was where Florida would allow families to potentially pay nothing in property taxes. If you had 4 children, they would give you a 40% discount on your property taxes. If you had 5 children, it was 50, 6, 60, 9, 90%. 10 children, you don't pay any property taxes. But that law was wild because it didn't apply to couples who had a divorce before. So if me and my wife got a divorce and then we remarried and I married some other lady and we had kids and we had 11 kids to help farm our land or something like that, that tax break wouldn't apply to me because I had a divorce. And then, of course, Florida, they was like, hey, we're not giving it to same sex couples or anything like that as well. So that's going to be interesting because I'm sure that's going to end up in the Supreme Court with some type of challenge. But this law that Florida passed, that governor, presidential candidate Ron DeSantis signed into law, was interesting because on its face, I didn't necessarily think it was stupid. Now, of course, there was some language in it that was sketch, and I was like, oh, Florida's being Florida. But there was some language in it that was sketch, but they ended up removing that language. So let me go ahead and pull the article up. Let's close this out. All right. Florida law restricts foreigners' real estate buying power We explain who is most affected, okay? And so when you see this title, and I'll give a synopsis of it, let me actually scroll through so we can get a little bit about it. The letter, the legislation Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law prohibits most citizens of China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, Syria, and Venezuela from buying real estate close to a military compound or critical infrastructure, including airports, ports, water treatment, electrical power plants. It makes exceptions for foreign nationals from those nations living in Florida with non tourist visas and for those who have secured asylum in the state. And so this led me to a question. Now, his law was a little bit more specific. His law was a little bit more, I guess, tailored to looking at countries where people perceive they may be some type of foreign threat and limit their access to buy real estate close to military institutions or institutions that may be sensitive, right? But this struck an interesting conversation with me. What are y'all thoughts on should foreign governments and foreign citizens who don't reside, have any visas, anything in the United States, be allowed to actually purchase property in the United States? Now, I know everybody's probably gonna say, "Yeah, they should be allowed because that's what we made it on." But when I saw that, I thought about it. Should we allow foreign governments, like, should the government of China be able to start an investment fund and go to Florida and buy 16 blocks of new developments to act as a landlord or for something to that effect? And I thought that was an interesting question because I think that, well, let me pull up the other article before I give y'all my opinion. Okay, let me pull up the other article, and so y'all gonna be like, man, DFD, this dude Wilder. But okay. But that was the Florida law. But it struck up an interesting question. Should foreign governments and foreign citizens who have no visa, have very limited financial ties, be able to buy real estate in the United States? How foreign purchases of U.S. home impact price and supply. Now, this is an article from 2020, and I'm not even going to go through and read it, but essentially what happens, so y'all can get to understand when houses are purchased by foreign entities, what's happening, and then you can make the call on should it be happen. Let's, I think we all agree that a government's job is to protect its citizens. I don't think you'll find anybody who disagrees with that. I don't care if red, blue, donkey, elephant, camel, whatever the hell your political ideologies are. I think, as a matter of course, most people agree that the government has an obligation to protect its citizens. Okay. This is kind of how I look at it. So when I saw that Florida law, the question came up was, should foreign governments and foreign non-US residents be allowed or have limits to the properties they can buy? And I pulled up that article because I wanted y'all to see that article from 2020, how foreign purchases of US home impact prices and supply. So what that article essentially outlines is that a lot of foreign government and foreign business entities were coming to the United States and buying blocks and blocks of residential real estate. And they weren't even using that residential real estate to rent out. Some of these properties sat vacant for months, for years. But these foreign entities would invest in US real estate because, one, they knew that real estate market is going to go up. It was a way that governments were able to hide their cash, or illegal foreign entities were able to try to clean up their cash by investing in U.S. homes. Well, what is the problem with these foreign governments buying out blocks of homes to not even rent out? Well, just think about it. If, let's use Venezuela as an example. If the government of Venezuela come and buy 14 blocks in some U.S. city, residential real estate, but they don't even intend to rent it out. They just buying it as a way to hold their money, to make a little bit of profit in the short or long term. What happens to those house prices? Because these people came and bought all these damn properties, the house prices in that area are going through the roof. Why? Because when these foreign entities come in and buy the block, they got enough money to buy in bulk. They got enough money to buy in cash. So nobody want to see your Joe Blow's little goofy offer that he got from his bank where you got to get a loan and pre-approval. No, if someone's coming in with cash who can buy 4, 5, 10, 14 city blocks, people gonna sell to make that money, but that drives the housing prices up for everyday US citizens. So y'all let me know what y'all think. I know that sounds wild to say that foreign governments shouldn't or should have a restriction or a limit placed on how many assets or the type of real estate assets they could buy in the US. But real talk is actually not a bad idea. There should be some restrictions on it, in my opinion, because the government's role is to protect its citizens. You want to be able to have affordable housing for your citizens. And one way of doing that is to make sure that influxes of cash aren't coming from foreign governments and foreign investors to buy residential real estate that's not even being rented out, but it drives the housing prices up. So I think it's not the worst law if something like that was written, but it's definitely something that should be thought about. Now, of course, there'll be some parameters and restrictions on it. They may be able to buy a certain amount or up to X amount of value of property or something to that effect. But it definitely is something to consider. I seriously doubt if it happens though. And the reason I don't think that anything like that would ever happen because the government has, and I'm sure y'all heard of the Golden Visa Program. Well, what is the Golden Visa Program, DFD? Essentially, foreign investors who can invest a certain amount of money into US businesses can get slid over a golden visa so that they can operate in the United States. And a lot of times we see that through real estate, but it is having a bad effect on the overall real estate market for its citizens. So that's just something that I want to toss out there to just kind of find where people land on it. But I don't think something like that. Again, I ain't saying nothing that's just, bias or racist or nothing like that. But I wouldn't be opposed to putting certain restrictions on the amount of residential real estate that foreign entities, outside entities could buy because they have so much purchasing power. It's going to make it harder for regular people to be able to get into residential housing. And I think that's something that's terrible. So that's it. We got the sweet old big mama who was able to get her $25,000 back thanks to the Supreme Court. I wanted to toss out that law that Florida had and ask, would something like that be considered crazy, or is it something that sounds plausible to you? Y'all let me know in the comments. As always, I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Y'all have a good one. Be blessed. Enjoy y'all long weekend. DFD gonna go to a barbecue, and I'm probably gonna throw something on the grill. I might do it live because y'all know I got a new torch coming in, so I could torch those steaks and get them nice and crispy on the outside while they nice and medium on the inside. Woo! Oh man, it's gonna be a good old time. Y'all have a good one. Be blessed. Peace. Common sense stuff. The country should be looking at. Yeah, I agree, man. I agree, but hey, lamb chops. I eat lamb chops. Y'all eat ramen. That's how it is when you the chef, bro. I appreciate you for tuning in, man. Take care. That's funny.